You know, at some point, we have got to discuss in earnest opening the country and saying this is the time when we're going to open the country. We've got to have some clear set goals, some things that we can look at and say, okay, we have achieved this and we have achieved that, something that we can quantify. And we've got to weigh the risk of coronavirus versus the risk of tanking our economy and people dying that way. Because a tanking economy, absolutely people will die because people will be hungry. People will be starving at some point. People won't be able to afford rent. And then human nature being human nature, you'll have unrest and unruliness. And that's not where we want to go with this country. But everything looks like it's pointing towards another Great Depression. Multiple outlets have reported that the Dow is down 500 points. The S&P is down 2.3%. They're predicting a 3% drop in the economy, the global economy. 3%. That's huge. I know you think in numbers from 100% to 3%. 3% doesn't sound like a lot. But when you're talking about the global economy and trillions of dollars, 3% is huge. That is ginormous. There is no way that we can recover from that. It will cause a Great Depression. The International Monetary Fund issued a stark warning yesterday about the coronavirus's economic toll, saying that the downturn is going to be the worst since the Great Depression. The Great Depression was from 1929 to I think it was April of 1929 to March of 1933. It started for most countries around about 1929, late 1929. And the worst of it was just, it was horrible. Even though we got great things such as peanut butter out of the Great Depression because it was cheap and it was high in protein and it made the hunger pains go away. That's why we have peanut butter in America. The rest of the world looks at peanut butter like it's a disgusting thing, but in America we developed, and peanut butter was a big thing because, well, it was cheap, it had protein, it took away the hunger pains, and it was really kind of a cultural thing. It's peanut butter is part of the American culture. It grew out of the Great Depression. It grew out of a moment of desperation. We needed food. We were hungry, and peanut butter was cheap. The grim forecast underscored the magnitude of the shock that the pandemic has inflicted on both advanced and developing economies, and the daunting task that policymakers face in containing the fallout. And I don't for one second envy any of them their position or their choices. No matter which way they slice it, someone is going to lambaste them for their decisions, because this is a damned if you do and you're damned if you don't situation. You just are. There's no perfect answer. With countries already hoarding medical supplies and international travel curtailed, the IMF warned that the crisis threatened to reverse decades of gains from globalization. Yeah, we were on just over a decades long uptick. Everything was going up. Everything had been higher than it ever had been before that you want higher, and everything was lower that you want lower. As in, joblessness was lower, unemployment was lower, wages were up, everything was looking good. Wiped out just like that. In its World Economic Outlook, the IMF projected that the global economy would contract by 3% in 2020. An extraordinary reversal from early this year, when the fund forecast that the world economy would outpace 2019 and grow by 3.3%. Isn't that crazy? How quickly things change. This year's fall in output would be far more severe than the last recession, when the world economy contracted by less than 1% between 2008 and 2009. You guys remember the 2008 housing crisis, right? Yeah, that ain't nothing compared to this. And there are already grumblings and discussions around where I live about rent and food and priorities and how do you get food in a bad situation. The food banks are asking for food and asking for food donations, but nobody has any food to donate. Our crops and our farms are in this weird position where, because grocery stores are and restaurants are not grocery stores, I apologize, restaurants is what it was. Restaurants are not operating. A lot of them are shut down. A lot of them are not selling what they used to sell. they're having to throw away food because the demand from the restaurants isn't there. But yet, here we are in a position where we're going to need that food, but they have to throw it away. Isn't that weird? Isn't it crazy how we get to that point? We're geared up for one thing, and you've got all these customers, and so you develop your crop, and you've got all your crop here, and then those customers' orders drastically die down, so now you got all this food. What's going to waste? You have to throw it away. And yet, on the back end, we're going to have people who are going to be struggling to afford food. Craziness. As countries implement necessary quarantines and social distancing practices to contain the pandemic, the world has been put in a great lockdown. I like that. The Great Lockdown. That's a good title. The Great Lockdown. Said Geeta Gopinath, the IMF's chief economist. The magnitude and speed of collapse in activity that has followed is unlike anything experienced in our lifetimes. And it's not. We are indeed absolutely living through a period of time in history that will be remembered for, well, ever. It's going to be, where have you been? Where were you when this happened? What were you doing? How did you survive? Especially if we get into a Great Depression and, wow, I don't know what we're going to do then. We're not geared for the Great Depression. At least in the last Great Depression, people had different skill sets. You know what I mean? They had the survival skill sets, the jobs geared them up for more survival stuff. But if we hit a Great Depression now, what good is your computer skills going to do? Interesting times. Definitely times for the history books. And definitely times that we will remember. And that we will pass on to our younglings as lessons learned, advice given, a lifetime of experiences dispensed to try to inform them and make their lives better. I love you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.